Um, we are live.
Namaste, good evening, and I would like to welcome everyone today to ICANN Conversations. I am lucky enough to today be in conversation with a domain expert who's going to be talking about something which is extremely important to the young generation today. It's extremely important to somebody like me as well, and it's a subject that I've been fascinated with for a really long time. So, when we talk of clean energy, when we talk of making sure our world is sustainable, when we talk about preventing climate change, I think the one issue we're all concerned with is making sure car pollution is kept at a minimum. And the best way of doing that is to either use hybrid vehicles or to switch to electric vehicles. And even though we've heard of the term electric vehicles for a really long time, I know most of us have, लेकिन इस एक विषय की इन डेप्थ नॉलेज हमें बहुत कम होती है. तो we are blessed today that we have been joined by Prerna ji. Welcome, Prerna ji, and thank you so much for joining us. And Prerna ji is a domain expert in the field of electric vehicles. And in today's conversation, she will be helping us understand the future of electric vehicles in India. Prerna ji is also a veteran. She has been a part of our armed forces, and now she is the CEO of Evole, which is a company which is working in this field. Ma'am, before we come to you with questions, with your permission, I would like to just do a quick background of what we are trying to do at the COVID Action Network. And to keep everybody updated, the India COVID Action Network is a network which was started during this pandemic. और इस network के तहत एक एम है जिसको हम पूरा करने की कोशिश करते हैं. हम जरूरतमंदों को उन लोगों से जोड़ने की कोशिश करते हैं जो सहायता पहुंचा सकते हैं. तो ये एक ऑनलाइन वॉरियर्स की टीम है, एक नेटवर्क है जो जरूरतमंदों को आइडेंटिफाई करता है, उनको फैसिलिटेटर से कनेक्ट करता है, एंड देन देयर हैज बीन अ लास्टिंग इम्पैक्ट ऑन ग्राउंड. सो द लेटेस्ट अपडेट इज टिल टुडे 91,894 lives have been positively impacted by the India COVID Action Network. We have more than 3,800 warriors who are working for this, and more than 2,598 NGO partners. And this number is only going to increase, and I would request you all to be a part of this, to support this, to join this, and make it even bigger. My congratulations to the COVID warriors as well, and my best wishes to everyone. Ma'am, with your permission, if we can begin the formal session now.
Please, with pleasure.
So, ma'am, मैं आपको अपने बारे में बताती हूँ. तो जबकि मैं बोलती हूँ मैं बहुत इंटरेस्टेड हूँ क्लाइमेट चेंज को प्रिवेंट करने में, आई एम अ बिग सस्टेनेबिलिटी फैन. इन स्पाइट ऑफ दैट हम नॉर्मल लोगों की जिंदगियों में जो गाड़ियां होती हैं, जो गाड़ियों की यूटिलिटी होती है, हमें अभी तक अडेप्ट करना नहीं आया है हाउ टू गेट अ हाइब्रिड और इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल इनटू आवर लाइव्स. एंड आई जस्ट वांटेड टू अंडरस्टैंड फ्रॉम यू व्हाट इज द रीजन even today that even though we talk about an issue so positively, the number of electric vehicles on our streets is still so small and limited.
See, there are two things from a consumer's behavior perspective that we need to understand. And this is a similar thing that we have also understood in a similar fashion ourselves as we evolved on framing this business model. So I'm sure we all are much concerned about the effects on environment, about whatever we do. And at the school we start celebrating the Earth Day so as to catch them young into the idea of being environmentally conscious set of people. The bottom line remains is that whatever purchase that we make, that's a consumer behavior, the cost to benefit ratio has to be achieved. Economically, if it makes sense to me, I start liking everything about that product. But if economically it doesn't make sense to me, I can find 20 faults on it where I can say that maybe it is making an environmental impact, but not so much. So in one way, if we look at it, the way we have structured the business, normally in this kind of business, everybody would put their KRAs big, bold on the wall as environment first. In our case, we have put economy first. Economy not only for the individual's pocket, as in when he buys that scooter, economy not only on his operating model, but also on his capex. So if his cost of purchase for a regular vehicle was 75,000, and if I say that you buy an environment friendly vehicle, electric one, at 1 lakh rupees, and you can save maybe 5,000 rupees every month, it's not going to make sense to him. Even if he can recover the entire cost of that scooter in next 1 year, it will still not make sense because the initial cost of acquisition is 25,000 rupees higher. So this is what we need to understand, why this subject is becoming a rage now, and why is it getting everyone's attention now, is because this industry has achieved that cost to benefit ratio, that now cost is almost at par, the capex is almost at par, but the opex is much lesser or negligible.
Right.
Now it is beginning to make sense to a consumer, and the moment it is making a sense, we all begin to rationalize. In this case, we don't have to take much effort in rationalizing the benefit of this product because the effects are written first and foremost bold on the wall. Second factor, it needs to make economic sense not only for the consumer but also for the one who's selling it. So if my consumer is getting benefited but the producer is not getting benefited, the chain is not going to complete. Lastly, it has to be the government. So if the government is also not getting benefited in one way, the chain again will not complete. So in the case of an EV, if you look at it, it's the consumer which is in a sweet spot. The manufacturer is about to be, we're at a break even right now, but the government definitely is, which is not the way in regular product segments. In this case, government was spending 30,000 crore rupees every day on importing oil. If you switch over to this segment, you're not investing as much.
Right.
So hence is the trade-off. Why is this environment friendliness and everything else is now being read much more than it was being understood earlier?
Yes, and also taking into account the way our cities are consumed now by smog, especially the city where I reside. I come from Delhi, and Delhi is the most polluted capital city in the world. Our AQI touches 800, 900 even. So we understand the importance of electric vehicles. And Prerna ji, I have noticed people, even when they are going out and thinking of buying a new car, and even when they can afford an electric vehicle that's available, one main concern which is in the mind of most Indians is hum charge kahan pe karenge. Charging stations are few and far between, and the convenience of just stopping at a petrol station and filling up your gas is so easy that the most prevalent concern that I have come across is charging stations kahan hai. So we understand the government wants to incorporate that, but if we could get some insight on that also from you.
Now, I think this subject also comes from much from awareness of the product itself. I quite liked during the COVID period, during this lockdown period, when it just began, I got shares and Insta feeds from a lot of EV users who said, you cannot go to a petrol pump. Well, my vehicle, you don't need to go to a petrol pump because I can charge at home.
Yeah.
So I like the way very simply they expressed. And I thought, wow, everything has been said so simply in one sentence when they just posted a picture. I don't have to go to petrol pump. And as an OEM, I was absolutely charmed that this is what I called directly from the horse's mouth, as we say. My customer is themselves advertising the biggest USP of the product. And this is where the biggest misnomer is, that you definitely need a charging station. So unless I'm operating a commercial vehicle or a heavy duty electric vehicle or a car or a bus, the regular two-wheelers, which is 87% of the consumers of the electric vehicle fleet in the consumer segment, you can charge it on like your mobile phone. You can charge it like your emergency light. Just 1.2 units of electricity and the battery is charged. 5 amp regular plug, just plug it in and charge. So you
Wow.
really don't need no network support, nothing.
I was not aware of this, and I am so glad we are having this conversation. I'm learning so much. So,
A
you
lot
mean
of
to say an entire big car can just be charged at home, being plugged into a normal, regular socket?
So there are a lot of those EV four-wheeler users also. They said we just plug in our garage and there we
Yeah,
go. So it's just one uninterrupted electrical source, if I can say. So अगर घर में बिजली आ रही है, if you're running a washing machine, if you're running a refrigerator, or whatever that is, if you're running an inverter, it's quite like an inverter. You're charging a battery at home.
correct. So, charging stations are not really such a huge reason like it's made out to be
Not
among
not uh,
the
not
average
a
people.
small scooter or a two-wheeler sort of a consumption. But yes, if I'm intending to do, let's say, 500 kilometers on a highway, and my car can do 200 kilometers on one charge, then of course at the end of 200 kilometers I will look at a charging station. But for 87% of the users, as the data said, we don't need
They
that.
need to just
And
use
for
it
a
in
lot of
the
people,
vicinity.
yes, and I think that sort of came from the range anxiety also, and
Right.
also from the initial set of products which were rolled out in the market, wherein again, as I said, the cost to benefit ratio wasn't achieved, wherein the kind of tech wasn't achieved to be able to meet the needs of the consumer. No, it's just it's been evolving for last 10-15 years. Now we've come far ahead of the curve now. So now we don't have to get into that range anxiety. We don't have to bother about 60 किलोमीटर से दूर जाती है क्या, 20 किलोमीटर चल जाएगी क्या, those sort of questions. They're over and above. It's a very interesting example I have. Like when the mobile phones were launched in the market, um, people would hesitate to spend 5,000 to 10,000 rupees on buying a little Nokia handset.
Yeah.
Because you weren't sure कि ये कितना टाइम चलेगा. Actually बात होती है क्या, 12 rupees a minute for a phone call, do we really want to pay? Is that call so important? But when we evolved and once that started to work, these days a lot of people don't hesitate buying a phone for 1.5 lakh rupees.
That's true. Yeah, that's
Yes,
very well said.
phones,
So
average
I think that's true of all sectors and all industries, Prernaji, because the more you work on something, the more you evolve it, the more cost effective it's going to be, and the more easily accessible it's going to become to the common people. लेकिन if I can just take on from my previous question, एक concern तो होता है charging station का कि चलो if I get an electric vehicle मैं उसको charge कहाँ करूँगी is one question. The second question, which is definitely in everybody's mind, is उसकी speed क्या होती होगी? So even if we have an electric vehicle, do we have to crawl at a snail's pace very, very slowly along the highway, or will we be in a comfortably fed up car and reach our destination well in time?
Again, this is not a question like you rightly said. It evolves from that range anxiety. It just a step forward from there. So again, the initial lot of vehicle which were developed for the electric vehicle market, speed, of course, because of the battery capability, because of the cost of the battery. So if you wanted to reduce the cost of the vehicle, you would reduce the cost of the battery and the motor and the charge of the controller and everything else. So of course, it had a impact on the speed that it could touch. So everybody started looking at EV, an electric scooter or a bike, as an upgrade version of electric cycle.
Right.
कि जिसमें अगर थोड़ा सा gradient आ गया या आपने 10 किलो आलू रख लिया, so you might just need to pedal it to give it that extra push. So that sort of a mindset carried on for too long. So we definitely encountered the same sort of questions. So before we would get on a product understanding or a test drive to a consumer, we said, you just don't think of nothing. Just pick up a scooter and drive 100 meters. So the moment they do that, all questions get answered. They said, oh, a lot of people, now you rightly said, because a lot of people who had touched the electric vehicle for the first time and were loaded with misinformation, the first sentence, I've heard it like a million times. They say, wow, ye to chalti hai. And I was like,
Yeah.
huh. Of course.
As funny as that sounds, yeah, you're absolutely right, Pinaji.
Yes, I mean, all of them assume that something running with electricity it has to be like a toy car. It has to be like a toy cycle. It's like they're not toys anymore.
Yeah.
They are utility. They are the production vehicles. So now we insist on everybody कि अब टेस्ट राइड आप लेंगे तो अकेले मत बैठिए, दो लोग बैठ जाइए and do half a kilometer, and then we get to question and answers. And so, believe you me, 95% of the people I have come across and the cases that I've heard, there aren't no questions after that. Once they take a half a kilometer, because all questions are answered. And
Right.
speed, of course, yes, was a concern. A lot of people, since as per the regulatory authorities, there is a separate segment of electric scooters which is approved under the small and under the slow speed segment, wherein the speeds are restricted by regulation, the motor power is regulated. So that was the first segment, jisme the vehicle doesn't have to be registered. You don't need a driving license. So it's a different sort of a TG which is addressed by that product. So that kind of assumption also carries forward too far in minds of the people, because they are the 80% users fall into that bracket of a user who really don't need to speed up.
Right.
So hence we pushed out another segment and we thought of it a high speed, a medium speed, and a high speed segment in the market. Medium speed for people who really don't need to overtake each other on a highway, but they definitely need to reach a place in good time, which means they would definitely speed up to 60, 65 kilometers an hour or 70, maybe 55 or whatever. And there's another segment. So we also rolled out a cruiser scooter and an electric sports bike, which can do 120 kilometers per hour.
Oh, wow. Okay. So that I
So
was, again, like I said, I was not very aware of the fact that apart from just the electric scooters, there are things like sports bikes which can also be run electrically. Another comparison I wanted you to make for us, Prerna ji, is how the emissions from a vehicle which is running on diesel compares to that which is running on electricity. Because when we do this emissions comparison, it makes a lot of impact on young minds, and it's usually these young minds which go out and buy their first vehicle, and they are conscious enough to take into account the environmental reasons.
correct. Emission level is 0. Now, compared to whatever that it takes,
Yeah.
We ran a fantastic campaign to be able to help people understand the effect of emissions. So one simple parlance that we drew from no smoking campaigns that the government has been running for all over. And we understand that the only effect of smoking, the only way one can be affected by smoking is by way of smoking a cigarette. But we don't realize how much harm if that cigarette is causing you. Million times of that emission you're creating into the environment just by a scooter, just by driving a petrol scooter. And now with the cumulative study, we realize that you're not only wasting or let's say investing or making more spends in buying petrol, you're also emitting as much of an emission in your environment and breathing it again and spending again and keeping that environment clean. So it's spend, another spend, and another spend to combat it, and another spend to nullify that effect. Whilst if you shifted to electric vehicle, you have started to address a problem right from the start.
Right.
So this no smoking campaign was so easily understood by everybody that you can drive in the campuses. We've got a lot of attention from places wherein people were not getting permissions to drive a vehicle because they were in an environmentally restricted area. So they were not getting permissions from a pollution board to drive something. This is a fantastic thing. There is no noise pollution. There is no pollution being emitted into the air. So it's a silent thing, and it's something which is saving the environment too. and of course meeting the needs of the consumer. So it was a win-win-win in all sectors.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can just take now our questions in the direction of policy, and if we can talk about public transportation, because public transportation is being encouraged greatly and widely all over the country. Whichever the government in whichever state, they want to make sure a maximum number of people use public transportation because we want to cut down emissions. But not all the buses in India still acquiring electric buses. It does make the news, but there is of buses is time. And even though we are
If you can hear me, there's a break in transmission.
I'm sorry, I was logged out. Did you get my question, Prerna ji?
No, I missed the second half of the question, please.
Yeah, so I also wanted to understand, are there any implications whether at the level of budgeting, etc., that a government needs to take into account when it plans to switch its fleet from the regular buses to e-buses?
Besides the economic aspect of it, there's a supply chain aspect also which needs to be considered. We understand that every business can be made sustainable when the economies of scale kick in. So of course government is supporting it, but there's also going to be a government support which will be needed to ensure that the supply chain is smoothened on all ancillary parts suppliers, which may also need government intervention in securing some G2G deals to support the entire industry, wherein we do not have the raw materials present in the country. The government would need to pitch in. So that would be one aspect wherein the government would come in for a support. The second, of course, government is doing it in one way that like they reduce the GSTs on the purchase of the electric vehicles.
Correct.
Similar impact on the GSTs is likely to come in also in the supply chain, in the backward supply chain for procuring the raw materials for producing the vehicle. Similarly, the government is subsidizing those vehicles. So the ones which really involve a higher capex. Now, I'm not talking about the vehicle which are going to be high-speed consumer segments, but also the commercial ones like the e-rickshaws, e-loaders, e-buses. Now, they are the ones which are going to be used for commercial applications, and that's where we will save a lot by saving in cost of fuel imports and the cost of running that vehicle. So most of the government fleet which is being run, like the e-buses, the government is now beginning to issue tenders to start procuring 500 to 5,000 buses in each sector so that they can reduce their costs of operations significantly, significant cost of reduction. So that kind of a capex is being invested by the government itself. So once the government sales start to come in, we already have achieved the scale of operation. The moment we get the scale of operation, the economies will automatically come in, and then the consumer segment and the retail product will automatically become cheaper, much more affordable. And then the first question will be answered, what you mentioned, the availability of charging points across the highways and infrastructures. Those questions will be answered automatically. Of course, this phase will see a bit of transition, maybe in batch wise, phase wise, certain kilometers of a certain highway getting covered, some states getting covered first, some half of that sector getting covered first, possibly in a manner like people move to LPGs or PNGs for that matter, or like CNGs for that matter, in phases. But yes, progressively, if we follow the guideline and the aim, if it is crystal clear ahead of us, I'm sure we will achieve it in the stipulated time, or maybe much earlier now.
So I'll just backtrack to one thing we were discussing earlier, and then we'll move ahead. And I would like to discuss a little more of manufacturing with you, Prerna ji. But because you just made a reference back to the first point that we were discussing, there is a lot of conversation around issues like बैटरी को चार्ज करने के लिए चार्जिंग स्टेशन ले जाने की क्या जरूरत है कैन वी वर्क ऑन इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल्स where the batteries can be removed from the vehicles and charged at one convenient location and put back in, whether it's the buses or it's the autos, because many times when we move to greener ways of transportation, like it happened with CNG right in the beginning, the long queues to get CNG in your vehicle were a deterrent. So is something like that on the cards, or is something like that even possible, that you have batteries which can be detached, charged, and then installed back?
Yes, for a lot of commercial vehicles, let's say the if I would say in terms of commercial operations, the first set of people which will surface as bulk users would be the delivery vehicles, and for them the challenge is not just of standing in a queue, charging, waiting for the charging time. For them, it would be the amount of time that the same vehicle is put into operation. So they might want to use it and put it into operation for 24 hours, leaving absolutely no time when the vehicle is standing 6 hours, 2 hours, or even 3 hours, standing just for sake of charging. For them, it makes more economic sense to have a swappable set of battery, wherein when the delivery boy comes back, the second battery which is charged and ready available. You just swap a charged battery, remove the discharged one, and put that back on charge. Right. So the scooters doesn't really have to be on charge, while the battery is the one which is in a queue and it is charging itself. Right. Similar thing is being planned for the buses. So that resting period of the bus, which is counted, is the period which is going to be looked after for charging. So of course, they will all work on swappable set of batteries wherein you just drop off a battery. However, the same formula will face a lot of challenge when we talk of slow speed or retail home use customer. Every customer has a different psyche. So when you own a scooter, you definitely want to own a battery. And you're a lot of people may be very unhappy, especially in the initial phases, to part with their good battery and which they consider as a very good battery, and receive a charged battery in return, which they are not sure will give them 60 kilometers or maybe 45. So unless they have a part ownership or 100% control over what kind of battery that is, so those kind of glitches will come in. Yeah. But for a retail consumer, they are more than happy to detach a battery, charge at home, plug it in, and run their scooter. But for a commercial operator, this swapping stations for batteries will be definitely very, very helpful. And they will come in. They've already started coming in majorly in some cities. And there's been very, very good response. Especially, let's say, on the e-rickshaws, e-loaders. Swapping batteries is the best thing for them because most of them are not owners of that rickshaw. They take up that rickshaw for 8 hours, use it for 8 hours, and go back and return that rickshaw. So when they return the rickshaw, the battery is exhausted, but the next chap is ready to take it up on rent immediately, which means the battery will need to be removed and a charged battery will have to be fitted in. So that kind of a mechanism on a commercial vehicle is already kicking in, and it's getting very, very good response.
Prerna ji, am I audible?
Yes, yes. Now, yes.
Am I audible?
Yes,
Prerna
yes.
ji, I'm so sorry about that. So I now wanted to talk about the taxation part of EVs. So we've just very lightly touched upon how there is a rebate in GST, but is there a rebate in a depreciation of a vehicle once purchased? Is there some way in the long term there could be money which could be saved on the taxation front, even maybe at the time of purchase? Can something be done? Can a tax rebate or an income tax rebate be given to somebody who's purchasing an EV?
Uh, Not directly to the purchaser of the EV, but any kind of rebate or subsidy, whether it is front-ended or back-ended, is passed on to the manufacturer. So the manufacturer can appropriate it to its backward supply chains on the GST implications, or for a GST rotation, or um, like in the initial phases when this kind of a subsidy support which came in for the electric vehicle operators and the producers, they had devised a system that when then they would sell the scooter to a consumer, and when the subsidies were received, the consumer would come back and claim his subsidy or a rebate from the showroom. So the supply chain and the entire process of buying for a consumer was dragged on a bit too long. But now, in case of high speed segments, I think as and when the subsidies start coming in and the OEMs start to apply for it, it will be built into the original purchase price of the scooter itself,
Hmm.
of that car itself, so that what the customer pays is the final appropriated value, wherein the subsidy or that discount has already been incorporated by the seller. But yes, this kind of a support is coming in a very, very big way. Again, a few glitches will have to be managed between the producers, users, and the government policies. But once those points are threaded and streamlined, it's just, I would say, weeks away, or maybe a couple of months away, and this would be sorted out.
Right. And since we are on the topic of pricing and costs, I'll present it from the end user's point of view. Now, when we want to promote public transportation, governments are seen to make the tickets cheaper. In my city of Delhi, during the time of elections, in fact, public transportation was even made free for women. But I believe in the long run, if we want to improve quality of life, if we want to make sure there is a lot of ease of living, public transportation needs to be extremely cheap. So when we have buses or when we have rickshaws which are running on electricity, obviously the operation cost the government is incurring is minimal. It cannot go lower than that, because all you're paying is for your vehicle in the beginning and then the salaries of the staff who are associated with it. So I would like to hear your views on that. Do you see us getting to a point when public transportation could really become as easy and as cheap as anything else around us, and it is going to be at a point when the poorest of the poor don't have to plan their travel and they can afford it?
They're a little far away, if I would see that, little far away from achieving that timeline yet. And I think much farther in announcing a timeline when we can achieve it, because it is not just the capex and the opex. It would also be of buying the school, of buying the buses or something, but it is also the cost involved in setting up the entire infrastructure. So it is like building a scooter, but you need to have a road to drive it. So it's not only just the vehicle, like not just being building a train bogie, but you need to have the tracks also to run that ship. Similarly, the buses are ready, but if the charging infrastructure is taking its own time, and
Yeah.
people take their own time to adapt to a requirement, when it is being provided and operated by the government agency, the adaptation curve is much, much quicker,
Yeah.
super fast. And but at that time itself, we cannot expect that the costs would become dramatically lower than what it is now, because the system is still evolving. There is still capex, progressively capex is being infused into it to keep developing that infrastructure. It's only once it is seamlessly connected and integrated, then we would see a dramatic drop in the prices. It may not become as negligible as free, but I can say it would be a reduction more than 50%.
Yeah, and that'll go a long way in helping a lot of people.
Long way.
And since we were talking about the adaptation curve of any new product which is introduced into the market, and in this case it is EVs, isn't that largely dependent on how much effort you are taking with marketing and advertising it? So in the field of EVs, we haven't really seen too many popular faces jump into the advertising bandwagon and endorse products which are electric, talk about electric buses or vehicles or scooties. So I kind of felt that there was a large gap here, because if we had
Yeah. The speech is broken off. The speech is broken.
maybe
The
did you get my question, Prerna ji?
the second half was broken, please.
So I was just saying that if we have popular faces and social influencers endorsing EVs,
I totally get your point.
help a long way with that.
Speech is broken off. The speech is broken off. If you can hear me, it seems to be some disconnect. If you can hear me, there seems to be some disconnect. Maybe it will need to be reconnected.
My apologies, my internet connection was playing up, but I hope you got my question now.
Your question. Yeah. Okay. So I've got your question, and there's a very interesting storyline why it has reached here, what you're thinking. It's strange that nobody's ever thought of this question before, but the interesting storyline is that I'll take 2 minutes to get to that, why we've arrived at this situation. This industry, as I see, is undergoing disruption. It's a disruptive technology, which is a technology which is um, trying to enter this segment in a way wherein the previous technology will be pushed out to a point wherein that becomes negligible. If we see the way the disruptive technologies have ever entered in any industry across the world, most of the disruptions have happened from outside the industry. You know, when we had the Nokias, when we had the AT&Ts making best of the phones, and you suddenly saw iPhone. I mean, they were never making phones, but they came into this space and started making phones. And now my daughter doesn't know what is AT&T. It's not too long a time,
Yeah.
right? My daughter doesn't know that if she can buy a Nokia phone today.
Right.
That's within a span of 10 years or 13 years. Right. So, and I'm saying it from my own perspective that when I started buying a phone, it was a Nokia, it was a Motorola. Now everybody wants to look at Oppo or iPhone. So it is the disruption which has come from outside the industry. This is how the newer technologies evolve and capture the whole marketplace, like the tapes and records and the CDs. CDs started coming from somewhere else, and the USB in the hard disks started coming from somewhere else. Now uh, we used to buy that Venus recording tapes. Now nobody knows where that went. So it's just that the way the technology is coming, they're all from outside. Drawing similarity from that parlance, if you look at this industry of automobile industry, let's say from within the country, from the existing automotive players, there are very, very few who have entered into this segment. From the beginning of this year, like if I would take the example of the Auto Expo, from the existing automobile giants or uh, automobile companies who had thousands of crores of turnovers, we could barely see few, the names we could count on the fingertips of one single hand. Whilst you would see 20 plus startups into this domain. So the majority of the segment that you've seen rising up were startups.
Right.
And that's the beauty of startups, because they are the ones who are doing the EVs. They are the ones who are doing two-wheelers. They are the ones who've come into bikes. They have a different mindset of a startup. So all that startup ecosystem is still evolving. So for a startup, before they sign in a big celeb figure, they would rather invest that money in ensuring their supply chains and putting that entire amount of money, like at Evolet.
Product development. Yeah.
At Evolet, I can say if I had the choice to be able to substantiate this money, 18% of a marketing effort, 18% of the cost in a marketing effort, I would rather save that money, maybe 15% of it, save that 15% and reduce that cost of my product by 15% and give it to my customer. Wherein I would say I would do a one-to-one with my customer, explain him the benefits of a product, and he is more than convinced that he's got something which is a much, much higher value at a lower price. And that's how a startup ecosystem works.
Correct.
Hence, you see very, very few celeb kind of heavily invested faces or heavily invested marketing campaigns yet. But yes, when the economies of scale starts to kick in, then you have that kind of a marketing budget buffer. And then you look at mass selling. And that's when you get into that element, which is the last in your marketing mix of a celeb endorsement. And that's when it kicks in, wherein you have loads of budgets to pump in that segment. And that, of course, will get into product price loading as well. At some point in time, of course, it has to. But in a product which is still evolving and trying to take a grasp of the market share, I don't think anybody has had the balance sheets to be able to pull out a huge chunk and invest into a celeb marketing. Whilst they would rather keep that chunk and invest into R&D, which will further reduce the cost of the product and give a better benefit to the consumer, and that would build up their faith in the product.
Right.
So the approach to building that faith on product has been on reducing the cost, getting more benefits rather than endorsements. But yes, very soon, as you would see, it will begin to inch in a way. Influencers. It would begin from tech influencers, tech auditors who would come in and inspect a product. And once they endorse it, the customer tends to believe that, yes, more than a word of mouth. So if you have to get to the masses, that's the way to address the concerns. Because I'm sure, like you and I are talking one to one, We started from the speed and the range anxieties, and now we've come to the numbers of brand endorsements and mass marketing and then celebs
Yeah.
endorsements. This is exactly how it would work with a with a B2C.
Right. And the government, Prerna ji, has been discussing plans for manufacture of EVs. And the phase is still not under production, but then there is a lot of conversation around that, which is generating a lot of interest, like the FAME phase 2. So can you elaborate a bit on that? And then I will tell you some of these electric terms that go over my head, and if you could explain those also for us.
Sure, ma'am. Um, I am yet to see some significant beneficiaries of FAME too, but I think the lockdown period has impacted a lot of supply chains. And in order to qualify to the most stringent norms to achieve benefit from those, there would need to be a lot of G2G support. There would be a lot of strengthening needed in the back-end supply chains. And then we would see a lot of people getting benefited from the schemes. Of course, then those benefits would be passed on to the consumers too. Consumers getting greatly benefited from that. So that I see will need bit more of moderation. Will some aspects maybe would have to be reconsidered, and then we'll be able to take that forward.
Right. I hope that comes by very soon then, because the more competition there is, the better developed our product is going to be, the cheaper it's going to become, and the more number of people will have access to it. And then I was talking about terms which are written with EVs that sometimes become very difficult to understand.
I'm keeping fingers crossed. I don't know what's coming. Whether am I going to pass?
No, so I got a spate of these terms when I was looking at EVs, and it's like BEV, EREV, PHEV, HEV. So I think the world of EVs has also got so much connotation that, oh, you are a techie and more than the average person, and you're just trying to be the cool one, and that's why you're moving on to the EVs already. And I look at it from a point of view of making it as accessible and as basic as required. As you rightly said, there was a time when mobile phones were a luxury. Everybody would be thinking about buying them, using them. Phone आता था तो उठाते नहीं थे, ये सोचते थे incoming का पैसा लगेगा.
Incoming का पैसा 12 रुपए 1 मिनट का, who wants to pay that cost? So they would say कि नहीं, we don't want to pay that money.
हाँ. So I'm looking at a time when EVs become like that it may have started as a statement, and it may have started as something which is covering a luxury segment, not so much as the common man's, but it impacts everybody's life so much that we all start using it.
True. But in fact, how we have designed it, we've tried to simplify things as much as we can. So no jargon, no jargon has been used in any way in explaining a product line. We've just kept it as simple as retail and industrial, and then a G2G segment. So let's take it down to a level wherein everybody can understand. And as I see it, again from my own perspective, if you would say I'm a military aviator, I'm not from an automobile background.
Right.
So we only entered this segment a year and a half back.
Yeah.
And we are yet to complete 1 year of our operations. We ourselves have learned so much into this segment, so much. And then we realized a lot of it was not needed because the entire industry is still undergoing a change. When we were actually setting up or doing a product design, there were a lot of thoughts that were going in. Shall 4 or 5 people collaborate and start calling it like this? Shall 3 or 4 people here start collaborating and start doing the product specification only on a 48 volt or only on a 60 volt? Shall 7 of us collect together and start doing it in a way that it becomes dependent on this kind of a charging infrastructure? I realized all those were speculations. The way the industry was still evolving, the more the discussion, the more the exchange of ideas, the terminologies again started to kick in. So when we started to say that high speed, slow speed kya hota hai? Segment. I'm sure if that is how you want to classify it, I would want to work on a medium speed segment. People said, ye kya hota hai? So that was also a terminology which just started to coin. And we looked at a different set of a TG, that not everybody to speed through the roads of Gurgaon and Delhi at 120 kmph and try and overtake the other. Whilst not everybody would be happy to drive slow and comfortable at 20-30 kilometers per hour. So 55-60, isn't that a medium range, which is a comfort range for everybody, which is not intimidating, which is not accident prone, but not slow enough. So why call it a medium range thing, and let's just start working on it. Similarly, on the EVs that were dependent on charging infrastructure, on the EVs who were doing this. So I think there also came a stage wherein every manufacturer started to categorize their scooters in a manner which was unique.
Right.
Which was unique to the other. Which gave them a differentiating factor in terms of nomenclatures. Some were adapted like a general terminology. Some are still undergoing transformation. Some, the more we talk about it, become the common terminology.
Right.
So it is still evolving, and as I see this year, as we see more usage and more number of players coming in, the sad part is that because of the lockdown and because of the break in supply chains, a lot of people are struggling. A lot of people are struggling for survival.
True.
The ones who do will do a substantially good business, because this is the time for sunrise, as I see it.
Right.
The night is almost passing through, and this is the sunrise industry, and it is the time for sunrise. And as and when the sun, no, it is going to take time till you hit midday. When the sun is on top of your head, it's going to take time, and it will see its own phases of progression. But once that happens, I'm sure all such questions will start to appear redundant.
Prerna ji, I'd like to ask one last question before we move in towards our goodbyes. As you mentioned earlier, apart from the 1-2 giants names in the manufacture of EVs, most other companies involved are startups. And the startup ecosystem also works a lot on VC funding. How much funding you are able to get, and apart from your angel funding, you are able to scale up only dependent on how good your funding is after a certain stage. So I'd like to understand from you, all the youngsters who are working in the startup industry now and who hope to be a part of the EV world very soon, how good is the VC investment for EVs and this sector?
Especially because of the phase that we have all encountered now in the COVID times, a lot of startups would look at support. And this support, if it comes in good time, all of them are going to cross over this tide, and beautifully. So yes, a lot of them would look at support. Support is already coming in from a lot of quarters. And like I rightly said, this is a sunrise sector, and the night seems to be almost over. The VCs can definitely sense, and they have a better vision than most of us. They can sense that, yes, this is where the sun is going to rise from. This is the direction. And this is how most of them are now smelling it. Most of them can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and are already kicking into action. So yes, a lot of investment will happen into this sector. Money will change a lot of hands, will go into the back-end supply chains, will go into securing a lot of sales. Government has started to come in one way. So not typically like a VC, but there is assured buy which is coming from most of the state governments, who are going to be using EVs now for
Yeah.
the state transport usage, not the big buses, but the small time scooters to use for their health workers, to use for their Anganwadis, for education workers, and now more so for the health workers because their trips are going to increase into class B, class C, class D cities. And how do they cut on a TADA of all khacha of every other worker who's working into remotest of the villages and ease their operations by not, if they don't have access to a petrol bunk, I'm sure they have access to some sort of source of generating electricity. And this is where the government supplies, the moment they come in, it is one way I see investment coming in.
Yeah.
That's a number of sales. So it will come in a lot of ways, in a lot of shapes and forms. It will.
Yeah, I hope the day is not far that EVs are penetrating even rural India largely, and we reach a point of ease of mobility with vehicles which cost barely nothing and are so friendly to the environment. And thank you
We,
so much for your time, Prerna ji. I am honored to have the chance to speak to you today. I'd also like to say a big thank you to India COVID Action Network. You guys have done such fabulous work, and I'm delighted that I could be attached to you today in however small way possible. And I hope we continue this further. And with your permission, ma'am, we'd like to wrap up with the anthem of COVID Action Network. And
and
we'll go into
I
that and sign off for the day.
love to say thank you to ma'am for such a lovely conversation, and I'm happy to engage in a conversation with a beautiful woman and such an engaging, intelligent conversation, an eye opener, which is just a fresh wave of air coming from your perspectives. Brilliant, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Your kindness personified. Thank you so much.
Love you.
मुश्किल है अनपढ़ी ये कैसी कठिन घड़ी सहमी सहमी जिंदगी बिखरी हुई बंदगी मानवता है पुकार रही दिखाए हम दरिया दिली I can, you can, we can, India can, I can, you can, we can, India can. हम सब मिल जाए तो मिलकर हाथ बटाए तो टल जाएगी ये घड़ी झूमेगी फिर से खुशी आशा टूटे नहीं हौसला रूठे नहीं साथ ये छूटे नहीं मंजिल दूर नहीं मानवता है पुकार रही दिखाए हम दरिया दिली I can, you can, we can, India can, I can, you can, we can, India can.
Beautiful.